The Nintendo Switch 2 is the best Nintendo console yet. I know a lot of people have a lot of very valid criticisms about this system, and I can completely understand why they might feel it's Nintendo's worst, but from where I'm sitting, it's their best console to date. I was initially very anti-Switch 2, I didn't think it was worth kicking up much of a fuss about, but the console managed to change my mind in 3 key ways. Starting off at the conceptual level, the Nintendo Switch 2 was always destined for greatness. I mean, in its reign, the original Switch was undeniably Nintendo's best console, perfectly blending the company's handheld and home console offerings into a blissful all-in-one experience that offered gamers a flexibility of play that simply had not been seen before. Thanks to the Nintendo Switch, many people, myself included, were able to spend so much more time playing games than they ever could have dreamed of previously. But there were issues with the system, from a hardware perspective, that limited the potential of each of its modes of play. The system was too small, which hindered handheld and tabletop mode. The hardware was incredibly flimsy, which caused all sorts of issues throughout the console's life, and the system was just not powerful enough to offer the performance that a lot of people were yearning for. So with the Nintendo Switch 2 effectively just being a better Nintendo Switch that sought to address all of these issues, there was no way it could possibly have failed. But that's the thing, it's more of an upgrade than I ever could have imagined, which brings me on to the execution. Every issue that the original Switch had, the Switch 2 tackles with pinpoint precision. I didn't quite realise before I had this system just how much bigger this console is than the original, but the jump in size is both substantial and immediately noticeable. I genuinely cannot use an original Switch anymore after having used this thing. In handheld mode, the system fits into my hands so beautifully. All of the buttons are perfectly, comfortably within reach, and my hand has a lot of space to grip onto the console, whereas with the original Switch, it always ended up feeling like my hands were getting a little bit cramped. The screen is an excellent size too. I never really had much issue with the screen size of the original, but this is night and day. Doesn't matter what game I'm playing on this thing, everything comes through bold and clear, and I can see everything that I need to be able to see, which also goes for tabletop mode. You want to know the real kicker of this system's bigger size though? The Joy-Cons. When the system was originally revealed, I genuinely thought that the longer Joy-Cons looked stupid, but actually using them, they are a treat. So much so, in fact, that I still don't even have a Switch 2 Pro controller. Using them in the grip feels really nice, but so does using them on their own, especially in tabletop mode. I don't even think I fully realised just how much of an improvement these things were in the size department until Super Mario Galaxy 2 released on the systems. Back in 2020, when Super Mario 3D All-Stars released, I hated using the Joy-Cons to try and simulate a Wii Remote and Nunchuck. It felt a bit clunky because the Wii Remote and Nunchuck is a clunky setup, but this was exacerbated by the fact that holding the Joy-Cons was just uncomfortable. But here on the Switch 2, using the new Joy-Cons is the only way to play Galaxy 2 as far as I'm concerned. I've genuinely adored playing the game this way. This, naturally, is enhanced by the build quality of the system. The Switch 1 often felt like a toy, especially when playing in handheld mode or with Joy-Cons. The hardware was light and flimsy feeling. It felt fragile, but not in the same way that a gemstone might be fragile, more in a way that a suspiciously cheap necklace might be fragile. But the Switch 2? Ooh, it's weighty, it's strong, it feels like a premium product. It feels like a sophisticated, well-made machine rather than a toy that lets the kids play their Mario games. The build quality of this system is just incredible, through and through, and that just makes the added power that this system has feel all the better. Breath of the Wild is really the best showcase of the Switch 2's potential, specifically because it was a Nintendo Switch game. It's all well and good to look at Mario Kart World or Donkey Kong Bonanza, see how they make the most of the system, but there's no direct point of comparison there. But with Breath of the Wild, its world that so many of the Switch 2's current user base are intimately familiar with provides a stark, almost tangible reference point for the Switch 2's enhanced power. Running this game in 4K at 60 frames per second with lightning fast load times and a buttery smooth experience in areas the Switch 1 could barely handle, that is a true demonstration for the power of the Switch 2. That is the best way to not only understand the technological leap, but to feel it. Every single aspect of the original Switch that left something to be desired has been kicked into hyperdrive with the Switch 2. It manages to execute everything that it sets out to execute perfectly, including some things that are not in its control. Because the final way the Switch 2 won me over is the timing of it entering my life. I was still very firmly against the idea of getting a Switch 2 when I got my hands on the system. This sounds crazy, but it's true. I graduated from university in June 2025, and to celebrate, I shared a wonderful meal with my girlfriend and my family. The evening was incredible, the food was divine, I was completely content. And then, right at the end of my meal, my dad and grandma exchanged a quick look, and I was handed a Nintendo Switch 2. This, as I'm sure you can imagine, broke my brain. After spending months in a state of peaceful acceptance that this console was going to pass me by, I suddenly had one thrust upon us. When I say that I understand the issues that people have with this console, specifically its pricing, I really do mean it. I had decided that this console was not worth me spending my money on. But when I had that barrier torn down by my dad, who won a lot of cool parent points that day, suddenly I couldn't actually find any objections with the system. I am in an incredibly fortunate position that I do not take for granted. Were it not for my dad, I would still not have this system to this very day. But the moment I did have it, I decided I was going to take full advantage of it, which leads us on to another case of impeccable timing with this system. Because only a couple weeks after I got my hands on this console, I got my first ever job. It was a part-time retail job, but it meant that for the first time in my life, I was going to have actual, genuine, disposable income. And it just so happened that my first payday aligned with the release of Donkey Kong Bonanza. Within the span of only 2 weeks, all of the hurdles that stopped me from wanting this console had been shattered. I had a Switch 2, and the money to buy games for it, and all at once, my opinion on this console changed. If I didn't have the Switch 2, I still wouldn't think that it was worth it. The marketing, the general buzz around the system, they don't do it justice. Only once I had the system within my grasp was I able to look at the truth of this console. And that truth is simple. Despite its flaws, despite the hurdles that Nintendo keep putting in place that limit its accessibility, the Nintendo Switch 2 is the best console Nintendo has ever released. And I can't wait to see how the rest of this generation plays out.